Hi everyone, welcome. What you see here is the stuff that I intend to feed my newest worm bin with. There's a variety of stuff in here. Most recognizable, I guess, would be the banana peel over here, and maybe this stub end of the base of a head of lettuce. It's got some orange peel attached to it. This is all potato peel, and there's some other various stuff thrown in here. And on top of that, I've got a few days worth of used paper towels here that I'm going to include as bedding to go with the feeding. And I've even got my prepared bedding supply on standby in case we decide we want to add more. But now, this being my newest system, it's already subscribing to this new idea that I've been trying to run with in all my systems, which is to operate my systems closer to their capacity rather than starting out with maybe only a quarter or a third of the container being filled and working my way up to filling it, thinking that, hey, if I start the system right away, almost at capacity, then that just, by its nature, gives the worms a little bit more room to live in. So that's been my design philosophy lately on my worm bins. So whether it's a brand new bin that was built right off the bat to be that way, like this one, or if it's one of my older bins trying to get to that point by getting pretty good size applications of bedding each time, so until such a time that I feel like I've kind of gotten myself to that point where I'm not wanting to go any further, then I'm feeling content. So in here we can see a little bit of a divot developing down here. Perhaps from straight above it's not so visible, but I can certainly see a little drop in the height of the material in here. Considering the system is pretty young, only 20 days of age, not even 3 weeks of age, it somehow seems like it's really making tremendous progress. And I think the main reason for that is because of the fairly large quantity of worms living in here. Not too long ago, I brought an end to the system that I had originally been running outdoors, and then when the winter months rolled around and temperatures really started dropping outside, I made the decision to bring that system indoors, at which point it was no longer an outdoor worm system. And that system appeared to have run its course, and besides that, I wanted to launch off a new outdoor system for this year. So I wanted to free up that bag that the worms had been living in. So the worms that were the occupants of my outdoor worm bag version 4.0 or who live in here today. And we've got a pretty high population in here as far as, comparing it to other systems of mine. A lot of my systems are launched with somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 worms, but when I ran the numbers for this system, just to recap really quickly, we hauled worms out of their old space, and then we launched off this system. And over that time, I took everyone's estimates, so thank you to everyone who contributed their thoughts. And there was a lot of people who contributed their estimates for how many worms live in this system. The number we came up with was 2,961 worms living in this system. And, a lot of times when you open up a brand new worm bin of mine that's only as young as this one is, 20 days of age, not even 3 weeks of age, you find yourself almost unable to spot where the worms are because they're surrounded by all kinds of bedding materials. I guess down here I unearthed a little pocket of some of the sort of stuff I'm thinking of. All this stuff that's got various shades of, brown and different lighter colored things. It's not castings yet, it's just their bedding. And to me it always seems like the worms blend in so well with that sort of material just based on the color combinations. It's almost like camouflage. But even last time we were in here, 10 days ago, when the system was still only 10 days of age, being fed, even then I think we were all observing, at least I know a couple people in the comments seemed like they were agreeing with me on the observation, how the progress of this system just seems incredible. And by that I just mean the number of castings that are piling up in here. It's just incredible. It looks like a system that's been around for 2 months or 3 months or whatever, you know. There, at least in my mind, there seems to come a stage where a worm bin goes from appearing to be mainly bedding to transitioning to a point where it seems like it's mainly castings. And I'm not sure I'm prepared to consider this system as being mainly castings yet, but it seems like it's well on the road to getting there. Fast. And besides that, just seeing so many worms in the process of excavating is pretty exciting too. So that's where we stand. I'm about to put today's food in, but I guess this was weird because this was put in here on day one when the worms were being prepared to get launched into here. I sort of pre-fed the bin last minute, pre-feeding before the worms got dropped in. So on that day, the food was added, and then the worms got added, and then, 10 days ago they got their second feeding, and today's going to be feeding number 3. This big chunk of cabbage leaf actually goes back to the day that this system got launched, 20 days ago. And it's not the sort of thing that you would expect to be sitting around as leftovers. Everything else, from what I can tell, that was added last time is gone. There was a lot of potato peel, similar to what they're getting today. There was also, I think there was pear. It looked to me like pear. I just watched the video again really quickly, and to me it just looked that way. I can't say 100% for certain that that's what that was, but that was pretty much what that last feeding consisted of. And it seems like they did away with all that stuff that was most recently added and have still continued to leave behind the remains of that first feeding that they got, which included that piece of cabbage. So I don't know what's wrong with that piece of cabbage. For whatever reason, they're just not interested in eating it. So, I took off a couple pieces of cardboard in the very beginning, and I'm going to bring those back because I thought that we would give these a more noble duty, more important job function down here, which is to accompany the food supply, because what it had been doing was being, kind of like a marker to show where we last fed. I bought down a replacement coffee filter with which we can upgrade them to having a new feeding zone indicator. So this thing here, performing that function up until now, can now go down right where the foods are going to get applied. I tell you, I'm tempted just to leave it at that as far as adding bedding today, because I do like leaving myself a little bit of room to work, and it almost does feel like, just by building the system originally with a huge quantity of material, it just feels to me like we've already got it to the point where I don't really feel comfortable adding too much more, because then I'll just be robbing myself of the space that I like to give myself to work, So I usually do dig pretty deep. I make a pretty good sized trench in which to drop the foods. I guess the reason for that is so that I feel comfortable that I've been able to almost entirely backfill and cover the entire feeding zone. I just don't want to leave anything sitting out on the surface for whatever reason. My systems don't have covers. Usually there's just a loose fitting piece of plastic or something draped over the systems. So I wouldn't want to attract insects or anything by leaving all kinds of delicious, fragrant foods out on the system's surface. And that's just a habit I've developed, I guess, over time, is to always try to cover the foods. So now what I sprinkled in here, all this little white powder stuff, is just pulverized eggshell. Treating them to a little bit of grit to accompany their feeding. I'm just thinking, what else do we want to give them? Do we want to give them any more bedding? I mean, you might have noticed before when I was probing around, just to give you a little example of what this stuff looked like. The stuff had been in the bin already since who knows how long, but this is what the stuff looks like when it goes in fresh. And usually when that stuff is what makes up the bin, for the most part, it is tough to see worms cruising around in this stuff. So, well, I'm just curious at this point, since we got through the check-in so quickly, and since I don't have any other systems to feed, this is just a lone system. A lot of times I buddy up my bins with other buddy bins, but this one's running solo, at least for now. Down here too, there's a pretty large quantity of leftover bedding material. Yeah, you know, all that stuff, as the worms begin to break it down for us, it'll collapse and give us more room to continue giving them more. But for now, I think we're in very good shape as far as the worms having adequate bedding material to live in. I just wish I could see more in there as kind of confirmation that the material is damp enough and comfortable enough, and I do see worms in there now. I pulled that last handful right from the very edge, furthest away from where the feedings have been getting placed down the middle. I usually take it for granted that the middle section where the feedings have been getting applied is damp enough and comfortable enough. And it's the outskirts, especially on these newer systems, that I tend to be a little bit concerned about, thinking that, you know, since it's pretty much all bedding material, it has the potential to kick off its moisture pretty easily and turn into a material that's just too harsh and dry for the worms to explore and live in. So that's my main concern for a system this age, as far as checking the outsides to see how things are looking. Here too, it's not too heavily populated all the way out here, but there are definitely worms hanging out in this stuff, so I'm happy to see that. Very good. I guess here we're getting a little chance to just check it out. Lots and lots of castings developing down the center area, but not so much out on the outskirts yet. There's a little corn cob, must have come with the worms from their previous home. So yeah, the worms came over with some leftovers from their previous home. I think that system could have definitely kept going. So when I hauled the worms out of there, a lot of the stuff that was still littering their material, uneaten food and bedding bits, also came along for their ride. But I don't think that would account for why we're seeing such quick progress in here. I believe that the estimate we came up with is probably pretty close to being correct, 2961 worms, because it would take a population of worms about that size to give us the sort of progress we're observing in this system. Very fast moving system, and that's awesome to see, because it's a rare occasion that I launch systems with so many worms. So now we're putting down our replacement feeding zone indicator, a little bit more in line with what I normally do in my systems. Most systems get a feeding zone indicator, which is nothing more than just a coffee filter positioned right over where we last fed to help us find our way back in case we don't know exactly where we last fed. And then the top covering paper holding out really good, surprisingly, considering the number of worms that are thought to occupy this bin. Maybe we've just given them such a nice comfortable space to be down in the bed that they're not too interested in coming up to the surface to check out this paper, but in time they will. They'll be nibbling on that thing for sure. Alright everyone, that's pretty much it for our check-in on my now 20-day-old Red Wiggler worm bin. Pretty heavily populated system, getting feeding number 3. And I don't know, at this pace, it almost does seem like coming back here in a week to 10 days seems realistic. I remember last time too, I even made mention of the fact that these guys are going to burn through that last feeding in a week's time. So coming back here in 10 days, not too surprising that they've done away with what they were given last time. So fun bin. Definitely cool to see what's happening here in here. But we're done. So before I go get things cleaned up and put away, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.